Here is how to make a stone chip in your windscreen disappear. Isn't that cool? Okay, so I have this little chip which needs repairing. It's bad enough to fail the car in terms of road legality. And rather than use a professional place, I'm going to use one of these $10 sort of DIY kits. Now, up front, I'm going to say that this will be what I would call a 90% result, not exactly 100%. To get closer to that 100%, you'd need to use commercial tools, I think. But in my case, I'm happy enough with how this turned out, as you'll see. So yeah, this is going to be a realistic look at the results that you might expect. Also, you'll only fix chips like the one shown, not long cracks as opposed to chips, and not larger scale damage. I think the limit for this probably is about a diameter under 1 inch or 20 to 25 millimeters. And this is the kit I used. I'm not going to bother recommending a particular one as they all seem to be very similar. This one doesn't even list a manufacturer or brand, it's just completely generic. I will link below to Amazon, which is where I got it. My point is, I don't think there's going to be much difference between the different ones. So maybe go off the Amazon reviews if they mean anything. Now it's basically a procedure of injecting resin into the chip, literally using a syringe. This is it. This is the resin, which will cure transparent and supposedly stop any progression of spreading of the cracks. It comes with a razor blade for cleaning off the glass surface at the end, and these double-sided tape ring shape cutouts, which are supposed to mount this plastic nozzle into which the syringe goes. And finally, of course, there is a sheet of very bad English. Now, the instructions look complicated. There's 12 steps total, but it's really not that bad. Okay, in advance, you should have the car in the shade and the glass should be cool. The first thing to do is use a sharp tool to pick out any loose bits of glass in the pit of the chip, any dirt or whatever. Then get some alcohol. This is isopropyl or rubbing alcohol. It's very good at cleaning up glass, and just give the area a good wipe down. Next, tape a rag to the screen under the work area. This is to catch any resin spill. I should be using masking tape here, but this works too. And next, you need to attach the ring adhesive to the windscreen around the chip. So take one side of its backing off and place it with the opening or pit of the chip centered directly in the middle and with the tab to the top. If you run your finger around in an outward spiral, you'll have the best chance of getting good adhesion with no air bubbles. And this isn't about sealing the resin in, rather it's about creating a vacuum seal for the next steps. So it's actually important to get a good adhesion here. Then the bracket and nozzle mount goes on. Again, with the tab to the top or the nozzle vertical. And again, run your finger around it to make sure you have a good seal. Next, the resin goes in. Now, the instructions say to use between 3 and 6 drops from the bottle, which is arbitrary. I think you basically want to fill the mount up so that the internal volume is full of resin, but that's actually not very much. By the way, I'm going to show you the reverse view of this from the underside from now on so that you can see the repair actually happen. You use the syringe now, and the first stage is to draw down a partial vacuum on the chip with the liquid resin resting on it, because there will be air at the present state trapped in the chip and the cracks between the glass and the resin. So we want to suck that out. So the syringe goes on the mount, and then you extract it to its maximum position. And then it rests on this notch with this metal clip that holds it in position. The instructions say to leave it sit like that for 10 minutes. I'd suggest you can also tap around the chip a little, which could help vibrate out air bubbles. And talking of bubbles, you might see some bubbling from the underside, although in my case there seemed to be very little trapped air, so there's not much to look at there. Okay, so after 10 minutes, you come back and release the vacuum by just pulling the syringe out, and then you immediately go on to the next step by putting it back in. So now internally there is normal air pressure, and then you go in the other direction by depressing the plunger down to the lower notch position, so creating higher pressure, which will now force the resin into the now evacuated chip and cracks. And you can see on the right it works very quickly. Now this is the same shot I showed sped up at the start. Here it is in real time, and you see the cracks have already basically disappeared. And you leave this in place under pressure now for at least 20 minutes, and you allow the resin to penetrate as far as it can. And then that's almost it. After that, you can come back and you take the syringe off and then remove the mount and its tape. Now this stuff is pretty sticky, and you'll probably want to use the razor blade to help get it off. So long as you keep the blade parallel with the glass, you won't scratch it. Don't use any rags or alcohol to help you clean it off at this point, because the resin isn't yet cured. You need to get the tape and its residue off manually. And the final step is to top off the pit with extra resin to try to surface the chip repair properly. Now to do this, you just add a drop or two of resin from the bottle and place one of the supplied sheets of plastic across it. Now, it will naturally stick across the glass, and then you just leave it all to cure. Now in the shade they say 1 hour for curing, but it's UV activated, so I wouldn't leave it indoors. And they say 15 minutes as opposed to an hour if it's in direct sunlight. Now down here in the southern hemisphere we get plenty of UV, so I took advantage of it. I want that resin cured properly. Now after that curing period, whether it's the 1 hour or the 15 minutes, you can come back and lift off the plastic, but you don't want to just rip it off or you're likely to take half the pit resin with it. So use the razor blade again and cut in toward the chip from all directions until you can cut across the surface of the pit itself, and the plastic will just come off. And then you need to again use the razor to scrape off the excess resin. And this is the final step, so take your time with it and try not to leave a mess. And obviously remove your rags and have a little cleanup. Okay, so here's my final result. It's pretty good. Like I said before, I'd call this 90%. It's certainly not perfect. You can still see it, but bear in mind that I have the camera literally inches away from it here. And also, I'll just remind you that this is what it looked like to begin with. So it really is a from 0 to 90% improvement in my opinion. So I'm happy with how it worked out. Okay, hope that was helpful for you. Have fun.